everybody. I am going to open our meeting with our karakia. Welcome to our Regulatory Compliance Committee meeting, 1st of December. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura he teo, he huka, he hauhunga, haumie, hui, tai ki e. Thank you, everybody. The apologies we've had for this meeting are from Community Board Member Gardner and His Worship the Mayor. And I just need to remind my participants that side conversations can interfere with our participants online. We've got Councillor Smith there, so please no side conversations, and we are live streaming. Thank you. And so I'm going to get first of all to the, and I did have an apology, but is she there? She's not there. Oh yeah, so sorry. I did receive an apology by email from Member Ward as well. Thank you for reminding me.
It's from Rachel.
Okay. And Rachel leaving it too. So the format for today, we've got our agenda items, and then we do have a quick workshop afterwards. So please, everybody, don't be running away. So I will start with item 4.1, confirmation of previous minutes. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Court. Councillor Collard. Any comments on those? No changes? Okay. The Regulatory Compliance Committee confirms that the minutes of the meeting of the committee held 20th of October 2020 are a true and correct record. All those in favour? All right, and then it's on to item 5.1, Environmental Services, our alcohol licensing update. So I'll move that the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the report, Environmental Services Alcohol Licensing Update. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vucic, thank you. And Rochelle, you've got a presentation on this item. Would you like to go right ahead? Thank you. Alcohol licensing, one moment, Rochelle. Rushing, Halima.
No dogs today.
Just before we get started, for members of the public, I would like to acknowledge our District Licensing Committee Chair, Anne Court, and just point out that I myself as well is on the District Licensing Committee. With a member of the public, well, how do we explain that one?
The Act requires you to have a pool of members of the public who have an interest in alcohol and have general interest in the law and the application of the law. So we have a pool of 3 members that we can draw on for licensing applications. We tend to use the same one for consistency and availability.
Thank you. All yours, Rochelle.
Thank you. I'll just go through to the next slide. Thank you. So I trust everyone's read the report. So these slides are just to give a bit of an overview of what was in the report. And the report was around the number of premises that are currently registered and the number of good host visits that have been completed. Thank you. So currently we have 257 licensed premises in the district, and of those 126 are on licence, 81 off licence and 50 club licences. We also have processed from the 1st of July through to the 30th of November 62 special licences. This is down of around 40 for the same period last year. We had 106 that were processed around this time. Decrease in numbers is probably a result of the COVID restrictions, and they've impacted the event organisers throughout the year. However, the team has been proactive more so on making sure that people do get their special licence applications in within the 20-day working day prior to Christmas. So that's hopefully tailed them off in order so that we haven't got any last minute ones before then. Good host visits. So each licensed premise has a duty manager or a manager, and they're responsible for the compliance and the enforcement within the provisions of the Act and the conditions of the licence that is for that premise. So they're responsible for the conduct of the premise and the aim of contributing to the reduction of alcohol-related harm. And so the principles of host responsibility, those include the promotion of food and non and low alcohol drinks, serving alcohol with care and responsibility so that they're not serving minors, they're not serving intoxicated people. They're not to allow any person to become intoxicated or licensed on the premise. And they need to arrange for safe transport so that they've got those there. So our good host visits between 1st of July and 31st of October, when I wrote this report, they have already done 78 good host visits out of those 275 premise, and our KPIs for levels of service is that we must visit 25%. So we're already well over that for the year, so we're currently sitting around 30%. So that's a good effort by the team, and so they are hoping to get through to all of those premises over the year.
Awesome. Thank you, Rochelle. While you're there, do we have any questions, committee members? Okay, I've got Councillor Cleveland.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just, I mean, your site visits obviously are tracking well ahead. I just wonder if the KPIs arguably set a bit low once every 4 years. That would seem a long time between visits. Acknowledging that you haven't found too many problems, but which is a good thing, but that's just a comment. I query the 7 licences withdrawn over the 12 months. I just wonder what's the background to that. Are they voluntary or otherwise withdrawn? Or have that been imposed on them?
Through the chair. So they have been voluntary. The reasons around that aren't really known. It doesn't appear that we've had any sort of premises that have withdrawn their licence solely around COVID or anything like that. Some licences, can be applied for and then withdrawn prior to actually being, that they're actually going ahead and things like that as well. But there certainly hasn't really been outside of the committee and everything like that where applications may be denied. We haven't cancelled any premises.
Is that not perhaps a reflection of non-renewed certificates?
Yes, that's right.
Councillor Collard, was that your only question?
No.
Sorry.
It was just an ongoing observation. With the visits to licensed premises, and there was 70 something, whatever, and you had a number that were non-compliant, and I understand that. Is there some recognition for those licences that are doing everything right in terms of a visit certification, say yes, this is good, so that as a business goes or a licence goes down the track of time, that they would accumulate, for want of a better word, good behaviour type things to say, look, we've been doing it right all this time, we've had a slip up here. It's not something that we do all the time, but it's just, there seems to be a lack of recognition of doing things right as opposed to, we've caught you. And certainly in my experience in the industry over the many years, been a bone of contention with me, where I strive constantly to do the job right. But all I had was inspectors looking to catch me doing things, ever. Nobody come and said, "You've done that right, Dave." And here's the police measuring those at one stage, a visit with the number of the inspector and say, all is well. I think we had to end up entering those in our incident book to say, look, these guys have been here this many times, we've never had a problem before. And yes, I acknowledge I've got one now, but I want to show that I'm working on this. It's not something that...
Thanks, Councillor Collard. Are you able to answer that, Rochelle?
Chair, there's no provision with, getting a reward as such, but it would certainly be in regards to where we're looking at 1 in 4 years that we would be going to a premise to do one of these good host visits. It would certainly be the ones that had not complied or had those minor compliance that we would ensure that we were going back to, whereas the premises that were always compliant and things like that, obviously I would be, expecting the team to verbally let the licensee know that, and we wouldn't have those on our radar in order to visit more often than not.
I do recognise that the 3-year term is perhaps a recognition of things are going okay after you've done your first year.
Madam Chair, if I may comment, there's also the adoption by Council of a strategic framework for compliance. We call it a customer compliance strategic framework. I think that's the right name for it, which does follow the VADE model, voluntary assisted, directed and enforced. So enforcement and the heavy-handedness that you described, Councillor Collard, is not really our preferred way of dealing with things. We do work with licensed premises, but under statutory requirements, we also can't turn a blind eye. So it's a fine balance between being flexible around these things and working with to achieve compliance. So we follow that across all the regulatory functions, including the alcohol side of things. And to Councillor Clinton's observation about the once in every so often, the people who check on licensed premises also check on food. So we have multi-skilling going on, in which is what is a fairly small team. They do both food and alcohol. So some premises have both, and obviously they're food premises and they also serve alcohol. And then some are food outlets only. So there's a whole mix of visits that happen on a periodic basis. And we have had times not too long ago when we weren't achieving KPIs because of staff shortages and just not being able to get around the district. So I think we've, as you've heard, we've done particularly well in terms of getting ahead of what may look like a low target, but it allows us a bit of flexibility in achieving the kind of visitation that we need to.
If I may add to that, as Dean mentioned, it was around the cafes or the restaurants that were probably getting the good host visits as part of that in the past because of the staff shortages. And we now do have a dedicated person for those good host visits that was employed in August of this year, which is allowing us to get to those premises that we haven't been able to get to outside of those ones. So it's good to sort of get across the board now.
Excellent. Councillor Visage?
Just a couple of questions. Just a bit of clarification to start with. I notice you're planning to achieve every 4 years greater than 25% of premises visited annually. Currently, you're tracking about 30%. How? Some of these are 3-year terms, I presume. So, what's your annual expectation to go through? How often are you going to go and visit everybody? That's really the question. Sorry.
Through the chair, we would like to get to each premise at least once a year if we can, but obviously it will be the ones that we have had issues with perhaps with minor non-compliance and definitely the ones that didn't have compliance at all, that we would be going back to first off before we would be going through to those premises that were compliant and had a history of that. Ideally, if we could get there between the environmental health officers and now with our dedicated person who is doing visits. It's building the relationship with the licence holders as well, which having that dedicated person is able to do. And so we would, like to get to visit them, more so just as a way of, working with the community as well.
Okay, thank you. Yep. I notice on page, page 22, you got monthly meetings held with the police and medical office have held with full team of environmental health officers to discuss alcohol licensing matters. Maybe I missed something, but it'd be really good from my point of view to see the feedback. So if there's any trends that are occurring in terms of alcohol harm, because often we end up in a debate, how many should we have and where should they be? Are there minutes being taken? Is everything being recorded?
Through the chair, yes, those are meetings which now we have got all of the environmental health officers attending, and they are relatively, it hasn't always been the full team that have been attending those. Certainly there are minutes that are taken, and it's a great opportunity to, for, that whole area to listen to what is going on and from each different department. I haven't got any feedback in regards to that, but it certainly gives us an idea of where there are problems.
So can I make Madam Chair, that as in some of our other reports, if we can get a report just showing some trends, in the building one, for example, we get trends where it's going up or down. Could we have some, and also the roading, we have trends in terms of cases, injuries and death. Do we actually have some trends in terms of some of the key, what either medical office or the police have outlined, so we can just see in terms of alcohol harm some trends?
So do you mean council research where out of this their meetings they might identify something on the horizon that could be an issue?
Or even trends. Like presumably they're reporting cases. I don't know if they're doing it on per numbers, but just get some trends. Is it getting worse in some communities or not? Just getting some general trends. Doesn't have to be specific, but general trends that can go into this report so we get an idea of how
on alcohol harm.
That's just a thought. I'm not stomping my foot, but it'd be nice because when I look at this, I think how it all looks good to me.
Yeah, it is most likely possible because on the Police Advisory Group Committee that I sit in Kawakawa, which is for the Kawakawa Moeroa catchment, they report to those meetings every 2 months on cases of alcohol harm just in that little subdivision. So they must have some data at a district-wide level as well. Thank you. And so no more questions of Rochelle for this report. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Now we are on to item 5.2. Update report bylaw enforcement and the recommendation. Anybody else wish to move this? I'm all about the bylaws. I'll move it. That the Regulatory Compliance Committee receive the update report bylaw enforcement. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Court. And Rochelle's going to brief us through this paper as well. Thank you.
So the requirement for this report was just to give an overview of bylaw enforcement within the district. Just go through to the next slide.
Sorry, 1 minute. Sharing it was sitting there. It was disappeared. Just 1 moment.
Thank you. So over for the start of this year, you can see that the bylaw requests for service have dropped significantly than what they have done over the last 2 years. This can be attributed to a number of things. There was an RFS coding change. There were some errors regarding those, which happened in the end of 2018, so that could have dropped it. During the COVID period, there were next to no RFS received in regards to bylaws complaints, and obviously with the bylaws that are currently revoked, this may account for a drop of people actually reporting those through. The ones that we have received during the current financial year have been around signage, keeping of animals such as pigs and bees, chickens and roosters, of course, removal of trees on public land, erection of fencing on public land, vehicle crossings with no permits, and private cars for sale on roads. So those are sort of capturing what the trend is. All of the RFS that we've had to date, they've been managed through education using the BABE model, formal letters and warnings. The Local Government Act, there's no provision to issue infringements under the bylaws, so there's no outside of those warning letters and education, it's straight to prosecution if it was necessary. There are bylaws, obviously, that are made under acts that do have the provision to do infringements. So even though many of the bylaws are still revoked, they do remain relevant, and so that's for achieving outcomes such as protecting public health and safety. And so these rules still need to be taken into consideration by the community. So council officers continue to enforce these, and we can still request permits for different events. So these licence and permits can be obtained to permit activities within the bylaw, and as you can see, these are well down as well. Alfresco dining and mobile hawker licences are the ones that have sort of come about, and as expected due to COVID, our tour operator permits are well down than what they are. So.
Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, just I noticed a number of those have been revoked, and you said that council officers continue to enforce for the protection of the public and that they remain relevant. I can understand how they can remain relevant because they obviously formed on good common sense and therefore they demonstrate good practice. But are they really enforceable if it's so viable? That's the question.
So they certainly can be with education, and we look at if there is any non-compliance and it has been relatively minor. There are ones that such as roosters crowing and things like that that can be dealt with under the RMA and the noise issues there. But warning letters and enabling people to get compliance certainly does allow us to deal with the bylaws still. In regards to prosecution, that would need to be dealt with under the Local Government Act.
I do have a backup question there then.
Just before you carry on, also the keeping of animals, poultry and bees, the setback rules apply within there.
Yeah.
For piggeries and stuff.
Yeah, I can understand. So there are other areas that bylaw may have covered that do pick things up. But the other question then is there anything that we are missing? So some of these bylaws are being revoked, and are there some issues, public nuisance issues, or whatever you want to call it, falling through the gaps that mean that we need to consider a bylaw?
Through the chair. So the bylaw team are working through the revoked bylaws and determining whether a bylaw is the best avenue to get compliance in those areas, and they have. They're working through the ones that they feel are a priority for the community, and I'm not completely sure on which ones, but I understand that they're looking at the animal one at the moment and seeing whether or not that's the best way to get compliance. The parking and traffic bylaw as well will be under review, and the public places bylaw and those sorts of ones are all under review. So I know that the program is there in order to get that done, and the monitoring and compliance team are involved in that process in order to sort of see what can be, how that can be enforced.
Any other questions, elected members? No? All those in favour of that report update? All in favour? Aye. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Rochelle. And the next item is 6.1, the BCA regulatory compliance update, and I'm going to move the public excluded recommendation that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting. The general subject matter of each matter to be considered while the public is excluded, the reason for passing this resolution in relation to each matter, and the specific grounds under section 48 of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 for the passing of this resolution are as follows. So as I said, the BCA regulatory compliance update, and it's to provide free and frank expression of opinions by or between or to members or officers or employees of the local authority. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. And we'll just hold off for a moment. Regulatory compliance. Closing karakia, but we are having a quick update as well. So don't go away, but I'll do the closing karakia for the public. Live.
We are not yet, not yet, we're just waiting for me.
And I will close our meeting. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawha tō tātou ariki, me te aro, me te whitetautanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene, kia ora.